How's our economy doing? Do you think we have turned the corner? Do you think a second stimulus plan is a good idea? What do you think about what's going on up in Washington? Well, we wanted to bring on an expert, one of our friends who I think always sheds light on where our economy is going, from Loyola University, Dr. Walter Block, joining us on the hotline. And Dr. Block, good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
Well, we're hearing calls today for possibly a more expanded stimulus plan, another round of stimulus. Son of stimulus is what some are calling it. That they weren't real happy with how the first stimulus plan produced. And, Doctor, would this be wise policy or insane policy?
Well, I incline toward the latter. I think it's insane. I'm reminded that in order to become a doctor, you have to take some sort of oath, some medical oath, and one of the things in that medical oath is first do no harm.
Right.
And I think economists ought to be forced to, well, I'm just kidding about that, but if there were an economic oath for economic practitioners at least, we ought to borrow this line, first do no harm, from the doctors. So the idea here is that stimulus is good, and it's just a question, well, should we stimulate this or stimulate that, or how much should we stimulate, or when, or where, or why, or whatever. But maybe stimulus is bad. And if stimulus is bad, then it's doing harm.
But what about this kind of stimulus? What about a stimulus whereby you stimulate the American family by cutting their taxes so that they have more money? Isn't that a stimulus?
Well, no. What we usually mean by stimulus is government getting involved more in the economy, not less in the economy.
Mm-hmm.
The idea behind the stimulus is that the free enterprise system, if left to its own devices, if we had laissez-faire capitalism, we'd be in the toilet bowl. We'd have high unemployment. We'd have depression, whatever. My own view is the very opposite, that the reason we have the problem is because of the government previously stimulating the economy. And what we ought to do is get them to stop stimulating us and leave us alone, because there is this thing called the magic of the market, as Ronald Reagan sometimes talked about.
Right.
And when we let the market have its own head, when we allow economic freedom, we're much better off. So I think that stimuluses do harm, and we shouldn't have any of them. Now, what you call a stimulus, and I'm sure you had your tongue in your cheek there, namely letting the American people decide for themselves these things and letting the families have more of their own money to keep and less money going to Washington or to Baton Rouge or wherever, that's not usually considered a stimulus. Well, if it is, then I'm in favor of that kind of stimulus.
Now, let's talk about this. And I was so outraged at this first, supposed stimulus plan that they said all these shovel-ready jobs. I'm sure you remember that rhetoric, Dr. Block. And now it turns out, of course, that, the jobs have not been created. Unemployment has gone up. Is that just the nature of government programs?
Yes, I think that it is the nature of government programs to mess things up. We had a sort of a very dramatic exercise or dramatic evidence of this, and that was the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Soviet Union. And the idea is that socialism doesn't work. And somehow we haven't learned much from that, because the stimulus programs, at least not your kind of stimulus programs, but the ordinary kinds, it's just socialism. It's just more government intervention. And it doesn't work. We should have learned from the Soviet experience. We should have learned from the communist experience.
Right.
We should have learned from the difference between North Korea and South Korea, or East Germany and West Germany, where there were two peoples that were separated by an act of war, but otherwise they were pretty similar. Same, culture, same economy, same IQ, same everything. And one went the socialist route and the other didn't, and East Germany and North Korea was very poor, very bad. And now Obama hasn't learned from that, nor George Bush. I'm not anti-Democrat, I'm equally anti-Republican. They haven't learned from that, and they're stimulating their way to economic misery.
Dr. Walter Block joining us of Loyola University. We're going to be taking some phone calls in a second at 661-2929 on the North Shore, 556-9696 on the South Shore. One more issue, then we'll take your phone calls. Joe Biden admitted in a interview the other day, Dr. Block, that he, quote, misread the economy, that the administration did. And then I got to thinking, well, no, not the people that I've been interviewing on this program, such as yourself, who predicted that this stimulus plan would not work. And he, I think in a rare moment of candor, said that at least their team, misread it. Did that surprise you?
Well, yes. Usually governments don't admit error. They blame greed or something like that. That is surprising, and I think that's a good sign. But unhappily, I don't really expect Biden to change his leopard spots or tiger spots or I forget who has the spots. But I don't think he's going to change much. I think he's going to go back to the old stimulus socialism plan, and I'm not too happy with that.
Let's take some phone calls. Dr. Walter Block joining us, Loyola University, talking about the economy. We'll get into some more of these issues as well. Let's go to Larry in Metairie. Hey, Larry, good morning.
Hey, Jeff, and good morning, Dr. Block.
Good morning, Larry.
Hey, Larry.
I just want to make a comment. I'd love to get your opinion on it. The stimulus to me is the stimulus to me is nothing but stealing. And it's organized stealing, and it's paying off his constituents in a sense. But my feeling is that most of the stimulus will not actually be spent until it's closer to the election. That way, all his constituents can remember and see the payoffs, and they'll vote for him again.
Well, there is this thing called the political business cycle. It's a basic premise of modern economics, and you've really put your finger on it, maybe unknowingly, but if you Google political business cycle, you'll see what you just said being talked about.
Really?
The idea that they pump things up right before the 2-year or 4-year elections. But the problem with stimulus is, where do they get the money from? They take the money from Peter and give it to Paul, and they tell us, let's look at Paul and let's look at the stimulus about Paul. But the point is that Peter has less money. So how do you, it's sort of like trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It doesn't work. If you take money away from Peter and give it to Paul, well, Paul looks pretty good, at least when you actually spend it, but poor Peter.
Well, right. In the first stimulus, we had $4.1 billion for neighborhood stabilization activities. That's Acorn, et cetera. That's just, that's stealing, sir.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. You're stealing from Peter and you're giving it to Paul, and why does Paul deserve Peter's money? I mean, if any private enterprise did that, the police would come and put him in jail.
And they're going to fund a group that's got a criminal track record to try to ensure their reelection, Larry. And that's, again, just scary. Thank you, Larry, for your call. Good to hear from you. 661-2929 on the North Shore, 556-9696 on the South Shore. Let's go to Mo, who's with us. Hey, Mo, you're on with Dr. Walter Block.
Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah, I called Mary Landry's office last week, and I told the person I talked to on the phone that I'd like to, see what's coming for me in the stimulus package. And they sent me a ticket to Scuttlebutts. I mean, that isn't what I had in mind, but anyway, could you address the Acorn issue a little better? Because I'm concerned about that. I mean, they're looking at spending billions of dollars with Acorn and these other agencies, and I think they're changing their name right now because of the bad publicity.
Right, they are.
Do you have any knowledge on that, Professor?
Well, Acorn is one of these groups that was active in the housing crisis. They were saying that there are people that don't get their housing, and they should get their housing. And I'm talking about people with no jobs and no income and no credit rating. And this is one of the impetuses of why we're in the present straits that we're in. I don't say that the housing crisis is a total thing, but the housing crisis is one of the things, and Acorn bears a disproportionate responsibility for that. I mean, if you put people in the houses that have, you don't ask them for a down payment, you don't ask them for a credit rating, or anything like that, there's this idea that the government is going to stimulate everyone should be a house owner or a homeowner. But why? I mean, there are only so many houses, if we were a lot richer, then maybe, and there's nothing wrong with renting. So What they did is they put people in the houses that never would have got into houses under the old, more reasonable banking criteria, and then they packaged these mortgages, and this led to the banking crisis. So I think Acorn is one of the bad people.
And by the way, gentlemen, Barack Obama represented Acorn as an attorney in Illinois, and he won a suit back in 1995 forcing the state of Illinois to implement the motor voter bill. So he's got a long association with Acorn.
Okay. Well, yes, he certainly is involved with them from the get-go, as they say, and Acorn is just one of these left-wing socialist groups that's trying to promote socialism, and it hurts the economy and hurts our society.
All right, let's take a few more calls. Let's go to Charles, who's with us on the North Shore. Charles, you're on with Dr. Walter Block. Hey, Charles, good morning.
Good morning to you, gentlemen, both. Just a quick question, and I'll hang up and listen. What can the average layman do that he can survive during this economic crisis that's going on, that's going to extend into the future for sure? However, like myself, I have no debt. I paid off my house. I have no credit card debt. I have excellent credit rating. I've been buying gold and silver pre-1933. What else can we do to protect ourselves from government interfering with our daily lives and taking over big business? I'll hang up and listen on the radio.
Well,
gentlemen. Thank you.
For one, Charles, I want to commend you on what you've already done, which I think are some very wise moves. But Dr. Block, what more can he do?
Well, that's a problem. That's a real big problem. My first suggestion would be, buy gold, because gold is free market money. It's a free market alternative to corrupt U.S. government fiat currency. But what FDR did during the Great Depression was he pretty much stole everyone's gold. So there really are no guarantees. Maybe another suggestion is next time Ron Paul runs for office, vote for him or support him, because he's one of the very, very few politicians who is supporting good economic sense. But I think the point is that when the ship goes down, there's really no way to save yourself. It's very difficult. If there are no lifeboats and the ship goes down, you go down with it. This gentleman has taken very sensible precautionary moves, as you said, but there are problems when the economy goes into the tank.
Dr. Walter Block joining us of Loyola University. We're talking about our economic situation, where we go from here. Stimulus, son of stimulus being discussed, also cap and tax, and of course nationalized health care. Dr. Block, this agenda is pretty ambitious, pretty radical. Looks like the American public might be turning against it. Poll numbers going down for Barack Obama. Does that give you any hope?
Well, yes. I join with, what's his name, the guy, the big fat radio guy, the conservative? Rush Limbaugh,
that guy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who said that he hopes that Obama fails. Well, I hope Obama fails, too, if he's pursuing socialism. And I hope he succeeds if he, which I don't expect, starts seeing that free enterprise is the way to go. Yes, so I am encouraged by falling poll numbers, but the problem is, he could be, the poll numbers could be falling for any number of reasons, although sometimes they'll ask, what do you think of his work on the economy? And if those numbers are falling, well, then that's good, and hopefully he'll be guided by that.
We had a tea party recently in Covington, and we did a survey of the participants and asked some questions about some key issues, and the final question was, what is your biggest concern about what's going on today? Please tell us in a few words what your greatest concern is right now. You know what the number one concern was?
No, please tell me.
Was our drift, our rush toward socialism.
Ah, magnificent. Well, my hat's off to the people in Covington.
And number two was big government. So that seems to be sort of the same thing, Yes, well, hooray for the Covingtonians, I guess you could call them. This is absolutely dead on. Obama is too socialist, too big government. He dismisses everyone as an ideologue who disagrees with his socialist policies, and people are perhaps beginning to see through him. Let's go to Tom in Mandeville, who's with us. Hey, Tom, you're on with Dr. Block.
Good morning, gentlemen. I must confess, for the first time ever, Dr. Block uttered something I didn't agree with.
Okay.
I take it back.
What? No, you're not going to take it back. I think socialism does work if its plan is to enrich the leaders at the top because they wouldn't have what they have, and they wouldn't have their power and control and their riches if we did have a free enterprise system. So it doesn't work for us, but it works for them, and they're there for them. And also, when Biden said that we messed up, we misread,
right?
What's going on in the economy? I don't think that's true. I think they knew exactly what was going on, and they're lying about that it's failure. It's easier to claim ineptitude than to tell the truth and say, "Look, we knew it wasn't going to work for you, but we also knew it was going to enrich us and enrich our banker friends, and that's why we did it." So I think that they're just they do what they do to enrich themselves at the top, enrich their bankers, enrich Wall Street, and then when it doesn't work for us, they say, dang it, we screwed up. We'll try better next time.
Yeah, son of stimulus.
You're a very cynical man.
No,
and I love cynicism. I think it's a very interesting empirical issue, and I don't know that I've put myself on record on this. This is a very interesting question. Does socialism work for the socialist leaders? And I think it's a horse race. On the one hand, obviously, one way to get rich is by pushing other people down, and they certainly do that. The people in the Soviet Union have dachas and very fancy limousines and stuff like that. On the other hand, if the entire society is starving, even though you're taking money from starving people and thus you're doing relatively well, or you're doing very well compared to the starving people, could you have been done better even for yourself had you been a Bill Gates in a relatively more free economy? And I don't know the answer to that. I think it's an empirical issue, and maybe in some cases you're right, and in other cases you're not. I really don't know, but it's a very interesting research question, and I thank you for it.
All right. Hey, Tom, thanks very much. Jeff Crouere here at Ringside, WGSO, 990 AM, also WGSO.com. In a few minutes, we'll do an open line segment to conclude the program, but we have a few more minutes with our special guest who is joining us from Loyola University, Dr. Walter Block, who's on the hotline. And, Doctor, I'm looking here at unemployment numbers. Some are now saying it could hit 11%. It's the highest in 26 years. What is your prediction on unemployment?
Well, it depends on what Obama does. If he adopts a laissez-faire policy right now and gets rid of unions and gets rid of minimum wage laws and gets rid of stimulus and son of stimulus and grandson of stimulus, we'll be fine. On the other hand, if he keeps on his present course of action, we won't be fine.
Here's what Warren Buffett said in an interview this morning. He said that a second stimulus package might be needed. He said Americans suffered, quote, a shock to the system from the economic difficulties in the final quarter of last year, but that we've started to rebound. He said, quote, we're not in a free fall, but we're not in a recovery either. How would you respond?
A stimulus program is like taking water out of the deep part of the pool and putting it into the shallow end of the pool in an attempt to increase the level of water in the shallow end of the pool. Can't be done. You take money from Peter and you give it to Paul, and Peter is the deep end of the pool and Paul is the shallow end. You're not going to change the level of the water in the pool. It's just silly. And what you do is you take wealth away because the stimulating or the taking of the money from this guy and giving it to that guy costs resources. So it's not just a dead loss, as in the swimming pool, which is maybe only a rough analogy, but it impoverishes us. Stimulating the economy costs money and doesn't do any good. Indeed, it does bad because it upholds investments in the economy that never should have been made in the first place and aren't viable now.
We'll take some more phone calls. Dr. Walter Block joining us, Loyola University, 661-2929 on the North Shore, 556-9696 on the South Shore is your ticket into the program. Let's go to Carter, who's with us. Hey, Carter, good morning.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Dr. Block.
Hey.
I was listening to Webster Tarpley, and he went on to explain about this fiat money that you talked about a little bit ago and how it's losing its throne as the international currency of exchange. And the way he referred to it is that the looting base, because of inflation, those that are invested in the dollar get hosed, which is what the problem with the fiat currency is. He said that the looting base globally, the extensive looting base, is being shunted. And now they're turning the program into an intensive looting base where they're just driving down the negative effects of the austerity of government. Now, you can find him on World Crisis Radio, and that guy really gives a good breakdown. And Dr. Block, I know that you know more than you're letting on, and you're trying to keep your hat on all of this stuff because of your peers and whatnot, but I think it's time for us to really get down to brass tacks, and we need to find out about this bank. What we need to do is isolate what it is we need to do to get rid of the bank. The Democratic leader, Dick Durbin, said that the bank runs the place, referring to Congress. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, Carter. Any thoughts, Doctor?
Yes, I certainly agree. I don't think I think I'm letting her rip. I'm not respecting my colleagues and not coming out for free enterprise. Indeed, my colleagues at Loyola University, New Orleans, are all very free enterprise, so I don't have to pull any punches. No, I agree. The central bank, the Federal Reserve, has run amok with our money supply. The money supply is very important. I favor a return to the gold standard, but if we keep our fiat currency, if we keep inflating it, we're going to reap the whirlwind because the U.S. dollar will continue and has been falling in value compared to other currencies where they haven't been spending like drunken sailors and monetizing the debt. Ron Paul has now got a whole bunch of Congress critters sign on with his policy to monitor the Fed.
Right, and that's positive, right?
In his heart of hearts, he'd really like to get rid of the Fed, but I don't think he's going to get much support for that, so he's taking a more moderate position. At least let's monitor these people.
Right.
So that's certainly a step in the right direction, but I agree with this caller's tenor of his remarks.
Would you like to see the Federal Reserve abolished?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Federal Reserve is a cancer on the body economic. We'd be much better off with gold as free enterprise money. Money is a very important part of the economy. It's sort of like blood is to the body.
And what's the steps involved in getting rid of the Federal Reserve?
Well, that's a very complex sort of a thing, but one thing would be to legalize gold as a first step. And what you would have to do is get off the present fiat currency standard and adopt gold. You'd have to have some sort of exchange ratio between the dollar and gold, and then we would buy and sell things in gold. The benefit there is that they can't create gold out of thin air and debauch the currency, whereas they can create fiat currency out of thin air, and that's what they've been doing. I mean, when the Fed started in 1913, I would say a dollar was a dollar because it was better in the 1800s, but at least it was pretty good. Now it's, I don't know, what is it worth, 3 cents or something like that, 4 cents? So
the Federal Reserve, of course, created by this government, correct?
Oh, no. The Fed came in 1913.
But created by the government of the United States of America.
Oh, yes, certainly.
So, but it can't be completely shut down by because it's a private-public sort of entity, isn't it?
Yes, it's a quasi-private public, which is roughly what economic fascism means. I'm not sure about the laws that would have to be rescinded in order to get rid of the Fed. I guess it would be the enabling legislation that started the Fed in 1913. But if we got rid of the Fed by taking every dollar that we've got and making it worth a certain amount of gold and having a 100% gold-backed dollar, then the currency would be very strong and we wouldn't be misallocating resources as we have been, which is what causes the business cycle and the Depression.
Let's go to Daniel in Mandeville, who's with us. Hey, Daniel, good morning.
Morning, Jeff.
Hey.
The Fed was not created by the United States government. It was allowed to they passed a law and allowing it to accept that type banking. The Feds were brought in by the Rothschilds and all of the bankers of the world. And if you look at those movies, like I said yesterday, the Rothschilds Exposed on YouTube explains the whole situation. But I was going to ask you guys, all these secret societies they have out there, the Bilderbergs and CFRs and all that, our representatives that we voted and put in Congress and all were supposed to represent us are going to these meetings. And all these meetings are for is to bring in one world government and take away our sovereign. Should these people be charged with some kind of crime, that this is treason to us? That They're getting ready to turn over our country to world power.
Well, I certainly agree with you that one world government is not a good idea, and I also agree with you that some of these Bilderberg organizations are no better than they should be, but I think it's a little extreme. That's why they call me Walter Moderate Block, to call people who are members of organizations like this treasonous. I think you have to go a little bit further to reach treason. But I agree with you that one world government is not the way to go, and that a lot of these groups do favor that, and we should be very suspicious of them.
And Daniel has been, alerting me to the dangers of these organizations for a long time. I mean, what are your thoughts on the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations? I mean, is there a connection between all these groups and those that do advocate one world government?
Oh, yes. I think that Daniel is right to be highly suspicious and indignant about them, and I share that with him. I just don't go as far along with him as to call it treasonous. But, I mean, ACORN, which we spoke about before, the NAACP, the various green organizations, they're all organizations with which I disagree, but I think the word treason should be used more sparingly.
All right, Daniel, do you have a quick follow-up?
Well, what kind of word should we use? Because we're almost there. And when we're there, it's over with. So
how about socialist?
Possibly say, put our foot down and stop this stuff?
Well, you asked for an alternative word to treason. How about socialism or fascism or something like that? I think that's very accurate. I think treason is a much more narrow concept where you're trying to kill people or something like that.
All right.
As opposed to secession, which I think is legal.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's squeeze in one more for Dr. Block. Let's go to Jim in Uptown. Hey, Jim, good morning.
Morning, Jeff.
Hey.
When I asked the doctor, we're talking national economy. How does he see the New Orleans economy moving along, considering the national economy still has not gotten where we think it should be, and it's kind of, take money out of your left pocket to put it in your right pocket. Now you got a whole empty pocket we have to pay back.
How do we forecast the local economy in view of what's going on nationally? Which is a good question.
I think that's a very important question, and I'm a New Orleanian, and I certainly want New Orleans to succeed. And I've been writing and speaking out on legalizing drugs. I think that one of the problems that New Orleans has, the economy and society, is a lot of people are killing each other over drugs. And if we legalize drugs, we'd have a whole new industry, and we'd have a lot fewer people killed. And I think that would give a big impetus to the New Orleans economy. Short of that, which I admit is pretty radical, the more free enterprise and the less socialism New Orleans follows, the better. So if we could get rid of the minimum wage law, or get rid of public housing, or get rid of public schooling, or any of these socialist ventures, the more we got rid of and the more free enterprise we were, the better off the New Orleanian economy would be.
But unfortunately, I see leaders here in New Orleans wanting more of all that stuff, more public housing, more public schools funding. And I don't see them turning in the direction of the free market, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't foresee that either. But the question was, what should we do if we wanted to have a good economy?
Right.
And what we should do is pretty much the opposite of what Nagin and the gang are doing.
Could we create like an oasis of economic health here if we did those things in a country that's going to hell in a handbasket?
Oh, absolutely, sure. Well, I mean, if the whole country is going down the tubes, it's a little hard. Everything goes down with a depression, but relatively to other places, I mean, at one time, we were bigger and stronger economically than Houston or Atlanta or many of these other cities, and we just sort of let it get away from us. So there's a limit to what a city can do, given that the state has certain things to say and the federal government has certain things to say. But within those parameters, if we had a laissez-faire mayor and city council, we'd be a lot better off.
And you know what? Maybe we will next year, Doctor, when elections are. Thanks for joining us.